Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rich, Simple, Human. And I'm sounding excited and breathless because I'm really hoping that we're also streaming, I won't be editing that bit, to LinkedIn today. And the reason that Gavin and I are so excited to live stream as well is because we're on a personal mission to reach as many people with our message as possible. So without further ado, Gavin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Lindsey. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It is amazing to connect with you yet again. And I'm going to do a quick intro for you, Gavin, because you are a health and wellness copywriter, a functional health and fitness expert, and a specialist physiotherapy. So you actually have a hands-on job in the NHS as well. So thank you to everybody that's benefited from your services and also for staying there during times that I know have been incredibly challenging. Gavin, for those that don't know, who are listening from America, because we do have a large number of listeners sitting outside of the UK and Europe, can you just explain what your day work looks like and what the NHS actually does and why it's so unique to the UK?
Okay, well, broadly speaking, the NHS obviously is the National Health Service. It's a free at point of contact service for anyone and everyone that needs health input. It's not limited to specific health conditions. So anyone that has any problem, in theory, can be treated with the NHS and is always free of charge. And my role within that is I'm a physiotherapist. Obviously, in America, our American friends will call me a physical therapist. And I have been a therapist since 2010. Qualified and specialized in neurological physiotherapy in 2014, and then further specialized as a stroke specialist physiotherapist in 2017. So that's where I've been in my day job for the last however long. And my current split is I'll do 3 days of NHS work a week, and I also do 2 days as a freelance health and wellness writer. So that's how my week looks.
Absolutely amazing. And Gavin, the reason that I'm always so excited to talk to you is because you write beautifully about a massive range of topics. And I was lucky enough to have you guest copyright for the Medical Futurist cohort for Remedy Health when I interviewed their founder, Andrea Green. And you did an absolutely beautiful job. Gavin, I know you're on a mission personally to improve the health of the nation, if not the world. Tell me, how is it you want to do that and what are you on a mission to do?
Well, you've made that sound like an incredibly lofty claim, but I've always clung to the idea that I can do what I can do within my little corner of the world, and I think if everyone focuses on making a positive impact in that way, then step by step we'll make a difference. So, really simply speaking, my mission is to try and make sure that health communication and health information is accessible to everyone and is understandable for everyone. And I suppose it would be worth saying that in the current climate of AI and the whole influx of information through all the other social streaming platforms, and health information has become it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I feel with my qualifications and my expertise and my background, I really would like to make sure that the information that people receive in order to make informed decisions about their health, to make choices that will benefit them, is rigorous and evidence-based. I want to make sure people are having accurate information to make their decisions.
Well, thank you so much for your authenticity and integrity, because I have a number of highly trained medical friends. I'm thinking of my particular PhD neuroscience friend. Often when I say things, I see her eyebrows rising as high as they possibly can, because obviously I have a bit of a quick and dirty conversation about what is true and what is not. And people like you in the world really there to make sure that when we make a claim or there's information out there, that it really is evidence-based, research-backed and true. Gavin, everybody I speak to, whether they are the bro wearing wheat band toting founder, or whether they are the lady in Tesco's who happens to also be wearing a Fitbit, everybody is overwhelmed about what they should and shouldn't be doing for optimal health and wellness. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, you've raised a really important question there. It's kind of a blessing and a curse in a way, isn't it? That we've got more access to health information than ever before. And now all of a sudden we don't know what to do with it. In the past, it was that people just didn't know. there wasn't the information in order to make those informed decisions. And now it's almost swung in completely the other direction. And now we're almost drowning in health information, and we don't know how to discern what's right, what's wrong. If you listen to the same podcast in a month, you'll get conflicting opinions from different health professionals. So, one person might tell you that high intensity interval training is the thing you need to do, and then another person will say you need to go all endurance for cardiovascular health. And I'm sure anyone that knows anything about those topics will if they've taken the time to educate themselves, will know that it's a much more nuanced and balanced picture. The idea really is that when it comes to healthcare, or your own personal healthcare, it is a personalized journey. So having your own metrics is good, but being able to decipher what information that actually gives you in a tangible, real world sense, in terms of, okay, these are numbers on my screen. What does that mean? What do I do about it? That's where the education part is so crucial.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Gavin. And I think your work is similar to mine in the fact that I have clients who are wearing biometric wearable trackers, so normally Whoop or Aura, and they're seeing the data, they're seeing an algorithm, and they're saying, oh, I'm green, it's great. I'll go out and train harder, or I'll stay up all night, or I'll do a crazy drive, or whatever it is they're doing that burns their energy. And of course, what they're not doing is actually looking at the personalized information behind it. So let me give you an example. Somebody might be in the green because they've managed to get their HRV up from 10 to 20. So that looks great on paper. But the reality is, for their age and level of fitness and health, I would expect the data to be so much higher. But they're looking at green and they're like, hey, I'll push. And then they push, and then it's back to red. And then they're on this sort of almost like a seesaw. I also have people talking to me about supplements all the time. I talk about consciousness, emotional wealth creation, and a lot of that requires patience and pausing. And they say, can I just buy this on Amazon? Can I just get this thing? You have to work at it. And that doesn't go down very well either. Gavin, you and I totted up before we spoke that we've probably got, I reckon, over 60 years experience between us in our respective fields. And of course, my background is leadership and business consultancy, latterly psychology, sophrology and emotional wealth creation. And yours is very medically based. You have trained yourself, and you've got, I can't imagine the number of people that you've had your hands on physically over the years. Why is, in the nicest possible way, why is the mind-body connection so important? Because it's not just the body, we're bringing both for well-being.
Mm-hmm. I love that question. I should add, by the way, the hands-on, yes, but with consent. The mind-body connection has been something that I've personally integrated into my physiotherapy role as the years have gone on. Started with a personal investment in my own journey. I've always been someone that likes asking questions. My foundation is obviously with a medical background, so it's very much scientific method, evidence-based practice. And I stand by, if we're making claims that health interventions are effective, it has to be robust. It has to be validated. We have to know that there are outcomes for this. But what I've found, especially in the last few years of my practice, is I've managed to weave in quite a lot more of that mind-body connection. The NHS, I would say, has become a lot more proactive in that. As frontline staff, where even as a physical health service, we always do what we call frontline mental health and emotional checks with people. So we're using validated outcome measures. One that I use in my own service is called the BASDEC, which is an acronym that I can't remember, but it's basically a sort of first line mental health screen. And it gives us an opening into conversations with our patients that allows them to explore their emotional and mental health. If something comes up within that, I acknowledge my limitation as a physical therapist, in that if there is something that is more uniquely suited to the needs and the scope of the psychologist, then that's where we will liaise with our colleagues, and that's where their skill set becomes more beneficial for the patient. But I would add into the third aspect of that, if we count physical and mental and emotional as one and two, I do get quite spiritual with my conversations with my patients, not overtly. Sometimes, it's not something that everyone wants to hear about, but I do believe in conversations about purpose and meaning. And, when I meet people who've had their stroke, it's a catastrophic, life-changing event for them. So we see them stripped. The person that they were yesterday is gone at the press of a button, so to speak. So I find that going deeper in those spiritual conversations over time, I get more from and for my patients. So being able to wrap the patient into that more holistic approach is something that really I found really benefits my practice over the last few years. And obviously, if I could just expand on where I take that into my writing, is it's that overall communication with people. And that's why if you have seen any of my content on LinkedIn, I will talk about statistics and physical interventions and so on and so forth. But I'll also talk a lot about mindset, and that's something I'm really passionate about.
Hello and welcome to Rich, Simple, Human with Gavin Williams, Part 2. Gavin and I are exploring what it means to be a rich, simple human from both my perspective as an emotional wealth creation advisor and from Gavin's perspective as an absolutely committed health and fitness and wellness copywriter and physical therapist. Gavin, we were talking on the end of the previous series about strokes, purpose and meaning in life. And we were really alluding to the importance of the mind-body connection and physical, mental, emotional and spiritual well-being. Gavin, can you share some of your thoughts and feelings on that stroke situation and how that just absolutely changes everything?
Yes, of course. I apologize with the maybe the technical error there. So I'll just go over some ground that may be a repeat for what we were just talking about. But essentially, I was saying that what I've found over the last few years is integrating a lot more of the mental, emotional, and spiritual health into my physical treatments with people. I was explaining really that when a person has a stroke, it's a catastrophic, life-changing event, and it happens at the flick of a switch. So the person that they were the day before is they're a completely different person the next day, and helping them navigate that is it's obviously much more than just a physical matter. So we do physical screens, we do mental health screens that will enable us to know if we need to bring on board our psychological colleagues. And I am quite a spiritual thinking person. Although I don't identify with a specific religion, I've done quite a lot of exploration in that world. And I feel like the more you know about it, the more it becomes inseparable from health and well-being. Whether a person feels that way inclined or not, you can phrase it in a lot of other ways. For some people, it's not a spiritual thing, but they do have a draw and a pull to a feeling of purpose, or there being a bigger picture. And I'll try and weave that into the motivation when it comes to treating my patients.
It's an incredibly tricky area, Gavin, isn't it? And I always laugh when I hear, or laugh, smile to myself when I hear humans say my podcast is not affiliated with my work with Stanford University as a professor, because the reality is my work is not affiliated with any group, religion, or organisation. However, it is incredibly important that I talk to my clients about purpose, and of course, then that comes into a conversation about being grounded and here on earth, purposefully made, there is breath in your lungs, and something bigger than you, a higher power, shall we call it. And I'm not going around and saying, any particularly religious things, but we're talking about the neuroprotective benefits of non-religious spirituality. And if any listeners are now thinking, what on earth is she talking about? Please go and buy any of the books by Dr. Lisa Miller. She is incredible. And if you're a parent, it is probably the most compelling research I have ever read about talking to young people about the fact that they didn't just end up here by accident. And they certainly didn't come by choice, because they weren't born. I'll get off my soapbox now, Gavin, and come back to you. Purpose and mission, you get out of bed every day because you know what your purpose and mission is, as do I. But I think we know a lot of people don't know what it is. And I've often asked my clients, is life about making money or is it about making a difference? And it's easier to ask that question to people that have obviously gone through Maslow's hierarchy of needs and have already got a home, an income, and security. But when you have a client or a patient that you're working with, how do they normally respond to questions about what's the point?
Well, I can answer it in two different ways. The first way when I would answer it from my physiotherapist perspective with that hat on, and often at the point of the person's journey when I meet them, they are devoid of purpose. They have had everything taken from them, um, and they feel all at sea. They feel completely lost. And I'm not saying I go in there and start with this purpose conversation, but I will help them. Maybe I have to be quite subtle with my wording. I'm not overtly pushing any angle, but I'll meet the person where they're at, and I'll talk to them on their level. And if they are saying to me, I'm up for this, something bad's happened, I've taken it on the chin, I'm ready to go, I know where they're at in their journey, and I'll hold their hand and we'll go together. If I see someone that's kind of lost and, just completely shocked by what's happened to them, that takes time. It takes a little bit more of the emotional coaching, that side of things. And by the way, it's not just me. The whole team that I work with, we're fantastic communicators, very compassionate team, always putting the patient at the center. And our approaches differ based on the person. And experience teaches you how you meet someone where they're at, and it works. The second way I was going to mention would be with maybe more with my health and wellness writer hat on. And I think that's about communicating with people where they're at as well. If we're talking about people that are very far into their personal health journey, they tend to be already quite invested. Chances are they would be purposefully seeking out conversations like the one you and I are having today, and they're already a little bit more educated. So then we would maybe be looking into the finer details of what makes holistic wellness. Whereas if we're kind of talking to someone that is, as you mentioned on Maslow's hierarchy, someone's a little bit lower in that spectrum, and they're kind of just getting their health needs met or their wellness needs met, but they're really not pushing toward that actualization stage. Then the communication changes, and then we start talking more broadly about what could good health look like, and that good health, to a very large degree, is a choice and something that you can be very active in making happen.
I think you're so right when you say good health is a choice. And of course, we know that people are massively overwhelmed and often looking outside for solutions. And I come against many people who feel very frustrated with the experience they're having medically. And then they start looking for their own solutions, and then they become very confused and incredibly overwhelmed, neither of which are nice ways to feel. I want to come back to you about asking a client to visualize how they want to feel, but let me just ask you again about that sense of can somebody please fix me versus what can I do?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And anyone that's ever worked in any form of healthcare will know exactly what we're talking about straight away. It comes down to agency and autonomy, and really taking that responsibility for your own health is hard work, shall we say. It requires individual effort. It requires you to make decisions. It requires you to put things into action, and not always easy. I mean, if we're talking about the different pillars of good health, you and I were talking a little earlier about, if you've coached someone and you've recommended maybe the thing that stands out from their personal profile is that they're just not getting good sleep, enough sleep or good quality sleep. So you've advised them on that. And then you know that they're not maybe doing that. It's because it requires change. Obviously, through physical health, one of the main things I talk about is exercise. But saying to someone, you need to exercise, that's not going to work. We need to kind of go many levels deeper than that and talk about you don't just need to exercise because of doing exercise. You need to exercise because of all of the benefits of it. And then if we talk about that, there's a level deeper than that as well. We have to keep going down to work out what's at the core of that person, to why do they want to look after themselves in the first place. And that, interestingly, is that will give you some quite interesting answers in that some people don't know. They just kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe I should, but I don't know why. And that's maybe where your coaching and counseling will be really, really important in it. And it's something that I try and weave into my conversations as well. Let's work out why you're trying to do this first, and then we'll work on what needs to be done about it.
Yeah, the education piece there is massive, and I find myself doing it. And I said to you earlier, I buy every supplement or tool or piece of kit under the sun, and I use them for a bit and then I forget about them, which is very silly. But when somebody reminds me why I would be using them, I suddenly go, oh yeah, of course. Now I remember the benefits, and now I'm dialed in, and I'm back on it. But we sort of forget, don't we? And I think also, if you've come from perhaps a home or an environment where fitness isn't a priority, where home cooking is not a thing, where you simply haven't had that role model, what have you got to follow? And we were talking earlier, Gavin, about the ADHD and diabetes conversation that I was having with somebody, and they were talking about there are a combination of symptoms that are incredibly difficult to manage because it creates chaos in the kitchen. And somebody was talking about actually going in and showing people how they can have a basic system for ensuring that they're managing their glucose levels and they're feeding themselves properly. Because with ADHD as well, it makes it even more complicated. Now, some of us may think, well, without I just do what my mum does, or I just what I've been taught. But a lot of people haven't had the education that we think maybe they have.
That's really true. That's really true. And while you were saying it, it actually made me think of another a really important point. Obviously, the study that you mentioned talks about supporting people that have ADHD. But I think it brings up a wider point about when you're trying to empower people to do things that are for their own good, you have to reduce the friction. And that's what I take from that example, is that they've laid out the kitchen, for example, to reduce the friction, to make the cognitive processes less demanding. They know where things are. They're in a consistent place. They're probably geographically laid out that it makes sense to go from one part of the process to another. And I think you can scale that up to the principles of health education for the wider population. You have to make things easy to do, and you have to make it you have to reduce the friction. If there's a slight bit of difficulty, people will find an excuse not to do it. And I'll hold my hand up. I'm a human too. I'm the same.
I think I will also just plug my desire, as always, to talk about evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology. We're designed to save energy. So we're not designed to be looking for things to do. We're designed to be sitting around resting, and when there's a bear to fight or a deer to kill, then we've got the energy to go and do it. Of course, the problem now is that we're not living like that because we've got all these creature comforts. So we do have to create routines, like you say, to reduce the friction that almost isn't choice, but it's biological and evolutionary, that we simply don't want to get off the sofa. And when there's sugar available, well, let's feast on it because we might need the fat for winter or the energy for a kill. Gavin, I put my gym kit on the floor in the bathroom next to the shower every night, and I hadn't even realised this was a thing until you said it. But I've always done that because if I don't, and I don't get out of bed and go straight in the shower and put my kit on, it simply won't happen. And it's although then you've got to get through the kitchen and obviously out into the outside, which is the bit where I can get diverted by the dog or 27 cups of coffee. But my kids do the same because that's what we've always done. It just makes life easier. And I forget that there are these ways that we work. And when you have a coach, a health coach, or somebody who's supportive like you are, you can help scaffold on top of that into other behaviours. So if you've put your trainers by the door and you're going to trip over them as soon as you come out of the bedroom, then why not have your breakfast ready for straight away when you go in the kitchen?
Mhm.
Whether
Yep,
it needs cooking or not, lay it out before you go. Make your packed lunch, walk to what it's all it's all the habits, but it's very personalised, and that's why it requires one-to-one human attention. The good news is that
absolutely.
AI can't replace this. So,
No.
as much as the AI conversation is growing, I think the need for accountability and human support is growing as well. I'm going to go back to visualization. Gavin, you mentioned that you ask people to imagine how they might want to feel or imagine what they might want to happen. That is incredibly insightful of you. How do you do that and what happens?
Well, I think again, going back to the personalized approach, it's about choosing my audience. Not everyone will warm to it. There was a lady that we sat down with one time who was struggling extremely badly with her anxiety. And as our frontline, before we wanted to get the psychologist involved, as just frontline members of the team, we tried to just go through sort of guided meditation and a breathwork session with her. And she she said it with a smile on her face, but she as good as asked us to leave. She thought we didn't fit her expectation of therapists. Let's put it that way. Um, so that was a lesson learned for me too. Um, so I think it doesn't work with everyone, but I know I've become very good now at knowing who I can do it with, and for the right person, it comes back to knowing, in some cases, speaking specifically from a stroke recovery perspective, there's a high percentage of people who have had a stroke that won't make 100% recovery again. So a lot of my coaching is around what can life look like at its best from where we are today.
Amazing. Uh, Gavin, it's so important that people have something to try and look forward to. And what I always talk about, and it's a very sophrological approach, is how do you want to feel, not how do you not want to feel? Because people will come into my practice and say, I'm angry, I'm cross, I hate my husband, dog, job, whatever. And when I say, how do you actually want to feel? They say, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's the equivalent of driving your car without knowing where you're going. Sometimes when you get stuck on those big motorway roundabouts, especially if it's like the M25 in England and another, and you end up going round and round and round. Well, if you don't know where you're going, that's what happens. And what you focus on, you move towards. So I think that that is such an important part of the journey. Gavin, I'm going to change gears a little bit and I'm going to ask you to talk about longevity because it is a fad or here to stay. And who is the person that's buying these billionaire longevity services that I keep seeing advertised?
Another fantastic question. I mean, personally, I feel like longevity isn't a fad. I feel like the messaging and the science to go around it has finally, you know, hit mainstream, so to speak. But I'm sure anyone that you're aware of that has been working in this field has been doing so for a very long time at this stage. Things like wearables, like we touched on earlier, are now very widely available. And I think they've kind of been bundled in with the longevity movement because they'll give people these extra layers of information. But if you have spend any time reading, studying, listening to the longevity stuff, yes, you can get very heavily inundated with information, but a lot of it is actually quite sensible, for want of a better word. It's about the pillars of good health. It's about eating the right food. It's about moving regularly and being active. It's about getting enough sleep. It's about safeguarding and investing in your mental and emotional health. And these, in isolation, are not new aspects of health. We've known for a really long time that each of these standalone aspects of health are good for us. I think what's really catching up is the messaging behind it, and I think also at the moment with that messaging comes the maybe the perception that it is quite an affluent avenue of health, shall we say. And that's probably because, I would say in large part, it's because it's not cheap to deliver this type of healthcare, because it's so personalized. It's as I discussed earlier, I work for the NHS, which is for all, but with that comes curative healthcare that is quite generic in a lot of cases, and longevity healthcare is almost the opposite of that. It's very personalized, and it's all to do with prevention of health disorders in the first place. So the people that are currently trying to access preventative health, longevity medicine, tend to be people that are in probably quite privileged positions, who are very invested in their health, which is fantastic. They tend to be people that have already achieved quite a lot in their life. And as you mentioned earlier about Maslow's hierarchy, they tend to be people that they have their basic needs met. They're looking at maximizing their health span, but also their lifespan. And that's a really big distinction to make when we're talking about longevity. Studies have found that internationally, lifespan has increased by roughly 30 years, depending on the country, of course. But in the sort of westernized world, it's gone up by about 30 years. Whereas health span, which is the amount of years of our life that we can enjoy in good health, has not matched how long we're living for. So yes, on the one hand, we are living longer, but we're not living well in those years. And that's where longevity medicine can really help the people that are currently looking for it.
I think that's a great recognition that we're living longer, but we're not living healthier. And who wants to live longer and be uncomfortable or be living an unpleasant lifestyle that you really didn't expect? So, longevity, longevity, longevity. And my will, Gavin, is that we see a trickle down effect where we're not talking about hyperbaric oxygen chambers at several £100s a pop. We're not talking about cellular regeneration therapies, the IV type stuff, but we begin to see people really engaging in breath work, cellular activation with gentle movement. You know, the free stuff, the sunshine breathing that we always do in sophrology, where we really focus on bringing that energy in to our body, and we're back to the sort of epigenetic factors. You know, we know that our behavior can change the way that our body responds. And when we dial that down, it becomes free and accessible. But of course, it requires A, the education, and B, the coaching or the support to get people to actually go and do it.
Yeah.
Gavin, you and I have got a list of about 5 million topics, of course, and this is always what happens when we have a podcast guest who's as fascinating as you are. And I want to close really by talking about trends, supplements, and other things that you see coming on the horizon of well, let's call it well-being in general. What's coming up? What are you writing about? And what should people be listening out for? And of course, checking the evidence of effectiveness of.
Well, I mean, your last point is generally always my first point, is that there will always be trends. There will always be something new. And I think it's always good to meet that with a healthy degree of cynicism until you have, verified that it's backing up what it claims to be able to do. We know there are all sorts of supplements that are coming out it feels like on a weekly basis. There's a new supplement with the name of a root we've never heard of before, or a compound of things that we've never heard of, and they may be of benefit. But I would always urge listeners and readers to, really have due diligence and make sure that they are as good as they claim to be. And that's why I would probably say, bringing us back to the previous point, is that's why when you do engage with a longevity expert, they are best placed to advise you on that, because there is also some evidence to say that the correct supplementation is good, and it can enhance lifestyle factors that people are striving for. But it's based on such a personalized profile, based on your genetics, based on your blood values, at the time. And blood values, it's another whole world of conversation for us, but it's really only a snapshot of that moment in time. So some people will maybe have an initial health screen, blood values being a part of it, and then they'll go away and take those interventions and start acting on them without any follow-up. And that's not really going to bear any fruit because it's only going to be based on that particular moment in time.
Of course, we also have the placebo effect. And I was laughing when you were talking because I think I admitted to what I was up to at the moment. And I'm covered in phototherapy patches to enhance my training at the moment. And I'm also sat here drinking my latest supplement, which is L-arginine increasing nitric oxide to reduce my arterial calcification score. Now, is that true, Gavin, or not? What do you think?
Well, until 5 minutes before we went live, I hadn't actually heard of that drink, so I'm probably not best placed to comment on it. um, but as I said to you before we started, if you feel like you've done your due diligence for it, and then who knows? Who knows? I mean, I recently had a slight tangent. I had a coffee that was kind of a super boost mixture, and it had ashwagandha in it and a few other supplements. And then I sort of got curious reading into that, and then again, take it with a pinch of salt because there's all sorts of side effects that are claimed, and I'm not particularly this particular supplement, but it just highlighted for me that I'm as susceptible to the whole supplement trap as anyone else. So I'm not anti-supplement. Please don't take that from my answer. I am more of a cynic, and I would say make sure that what you're taking is right for you. Let me put it that way instead.
And I think people need to be very aware of how they feel. So if suddenly you think something's changing, or my skin is itching, or perhaps my digestion is changing, be very mindful. And for anybody out there who's loading up on GLP-1 or Ozempic and other things, of course, everything has a side effect and there's always a trade-off. So just be mindful. But it is important that you do what's right for you. Gavin, as we close today's show, our plea is that anybody out there, especially on LinkedIn, connects with you and I. Gavin, you and I are very passionate about all of these things, and we're passionate about bringing people information that really makes a difference to their health and well-being. Where can people find you, Gavin, and where do you like hanging out most of all?
Well, I tend to be mostly found on LinkedIn. It's just Gavin Williams. You'll find me on there. Gavin Williams Health, I believe, is my name on there fully. I have an Instagram page, although you probably won't see me being too active on there. And the easiest way to find me would probably just be www.itmcopywriting.com, and that's my website.
Amazing. And if anybody wants to talk to me about emotional wealth creation, advisory services, sophrology, psychology, or behavior change using wearable health trackers and biometrics, you can find me lindseyfrancis.co.uk, Lindsey with an E, Francis with an E, or on other platforms. And for now, thank you very much. Until next time.